Aloha and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books from the shelves, blow the dust off them, and remind ourselves why it is we love them. My name's Tom Galley, and with me today is Tony Pasculi.
Thanks, Tom.
What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about Kurt Vonnegut's probably most famous novel, Slaughterhouse Five.
It has been so long since I picked this up.
Yeah? How long has it been?
I think the last time I read this, I was still in Louisiana, which puts it pre-2000.
Okay, so 25 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time. So revisiting it after 25 years, is it what you remembered it to be?
You remember when we read Cat's Cradle and realized neither one of us remembered anything about the book except for the fact that it had a thing called Ice Nine? I remembered nothing about this book except that it had to do with the firebombing of Dresden and that there were aliens.
Yeah.
Those two facts were all I took with me into that book. So this was almost like a brand new reading experience.
Huh. How was it as an almost brand new reading experience?
I really enjoyed most of it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because you're obviously a Vonnegut fan from before, because you picked Cat's Cradle last year or 2 years ago, whenever it was.
I think I was really into Vonnegut, late high school, early college, and then I probably haven't revisited him in quite a while. So this might not be the last time we have this conversation.
Yeah, who knows how long we're going to do this, but if we keep going long enough, eventually Sirens of Titan will make its way onto the list.
Yeah.
So, or Breakfast of Champions. I was a huge, there's that, I think there's a phase you go through when you're in college when you latch onto an author who's just kind of like sort of weird and sort of counterculture and sort of literary and sort of smart, and you just go, this is my new obsession. And I just read everything by Vonnegut that I could. So Cat's Cradle, Sirens of Titan, Slaughterhouse Five, Breakfast of Champions, the short stories. I don't think I read Player Piano or God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, which I don't even know what that one's about. Interesting to discover that he's a character. Yeah. So I think I read this in college, and because I was reading everything, I just kind of lumped that in with all of his other stuff. It's a little bit more autobiographical. It's a little bit more serious. But, the alien thing puts it squarely in the same camp as Cat's Cradle and Sirens and Breakfast. Yep. But then I read it again, I want to say 10, 15 years ago when I did my MFA at Stone Coast. And because I was a writing MFA, I was much more looking at writing style and how Vonnegut does what he does. And I remember being blown away by this book. I read it for someone's going to do a presentation on it, so I just had to read it. Mm-hmm. I didn't pick it up by choice. And I was like, God, this is a good book. This is really, really good. This is so well written. I was just in awe of how well written it was. And so that's what I carried into this read. And I was like, this is a weird book. It's so weird. I get it. I think I understand why it's weird, but man, is it weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the opening part where it's all autobiographical, talking about the fact that he can't write this book, that this book can't be written.
That's interesting. I didn't like that. Because that's chapter one, and chapter one feels like an author's foreword to a book. And I never want to read the author's foreword first. I want to read it last anyway. And my particular edition has a foreword by another author entirely. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to read the foreword, skip over that. What? There's another foreword? What the hell? And I'm skipping back and forth, and I'm checking other editions. It's like, no, this is what he wanted. I hate this. So I did read it, and then I read the whole book, and then I went back and read chapter one again. Mm-hmm. And having done that, I wish he hadn't included it, or if he'd put it at the end. I think it detracts from the book for me. So, but you had a different experience.
Yeah, I mean, I had some vague memory of the fact that he had written a book about the fact he couldn't write a book. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what I was remembering. But yeah, I enjoyed the autobiographical nature of it. I learned a little bit about Kurt Vonnegut. I enjoyed the fact that he spent decades telling people he was writing an important book about the firebombing of Dresden while never actually being able to write the book about the firebombing of Dresden. And then at the end of chapter one, he says, and that's the end of the book. And then he starts on a completely new book, right? So the rest, from chapters 2 on is, in his mind, it seems, a separate book, because he's now finished the only book he's actually going to write, the only factual book he's going to write about that happening.
Yeah, and now he writes a fictional book about Billy Pilgrim and his experience in the war and the firebombing of Dresden and the Tralfamadorians and all of that.
Yep.
Yeah. I get it. I can't imagine living through something like that. So, context for those who haven't read the book, Vonnegut was in the army in World War II, was taken prisoner. He's a prisoner of war, taken to Dresden, and kept overnight in a slaughterhouse. And that, while he was there, the Allied forces firebombed Dresden, killing 130-something thousand people, just with conventional weapons, and just absolutely destroying the city. And he and the other prisoners and their guards survived because they were in this underground slaughterhouse, and just emerged to an absolute hellscape.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's rough. Underselling it.
And he spends all of chapter 1 talking about how important this is and how somebody really needs to write a book about it and how the book can't be written. And, And then he gives up and we move on into this weird Billy Pilgrim saga.
And the Billy Pilgrim saga, if it weren't for the fact that at one point he identifies some other character as himself, you could think that Billy Pilgrim is a stand-in for him. And maybe Billy Pilgrim is a stand-in for him anyway, but he does carefully carve out another person as the actual author himself. Yeah. Maybe to give himself license or maybe to give himself distance. So the rest of it is fiction.
Well, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't.
Deeply informed by fact. Yeah. Let's hope at least some of it is fiction, because at one point Billy Pilgrim gets kidnapped by aliens who look like toilet plungers wearing gloves. Yeah. So,
which reminds me of a Far Side cartoon, right? The UFO has landed and there's a farmer there, and the caption is like, Willie inadvertently dooms the Earth when he grabs the leader by the head and vigorously shakes. And the alien, is, like you said, a toilet plunger, and neck comes up, and then its head is a hand. So that's what I'm envisioning as I read the description of the
now you messed me up. Tralfamador. Tralfamador? I think it's Tralfamador.
I thought there was a G in there somewhere.
Was there?
I don't know. The aliens. I will refer to them henceforth as the aliens. You can try to wrap your tongue around that if you like.
Tralfamadorians. There's no G.
There is no G.
You're thinking of Trafalgar.
I am, in fact.
Okay. So let's talk about, there's 3 parts to this book. There is chapter 1, which is its own thing. Mm-hmm. And then there is the very historically grounded experience of Billy Pilgrim in World War II and the firebombing of Dresden, and his life a little bit before and after that, which is all pretty realistic.
Historically grounded, yet ludicrous.
Yeah. And then there's this other part where he gets kidnapped by aliens and taken away to the planet of Tralfamador, where they explain to him that time is not what he thinks it is, that it's really everything that has happened, and everything that will happen has happened. It's a block universe, like we were talking about 2 weeks ago on Watchmen.
Now this, and it's interesting, the first words of the second book, right? The first words of chapter 2 is Billy Pilgrim came unstuck in time.
Yeah.
And this is something that happened to him completely separate from being kidnapped by aliens who can see the entirety of time, right? It's just coincidence that of all the people they could have kidnapped, he's the one. He's unstuck in time, and he keeps moving back and forth and around. I don't know. It's interesting, yeah.
In a block universe, there's literally no such thing as coincidence, because everything is static. Only our perception shifts around.
Well, from our perception, it's a coincidence that the title character of this thing happens to be somebody who, to some degree, can experience what the aliens experience as normal existence.
Yes. I think it's thematically useful for what Vonnegut wants to say. He seems to be using this idea. Well, he seems to be doing 2 things with the aliens. And one is he's indulging his weirdness, his penchant for weirdness, which seems to be unshakable. And either he just threads it right into the narrative, like with Cat's Cradle, or here he sort of splits it out into two separate things, which is weird. But it allows, I think, a tremendous amount of emotional distance from the events of the firebombing. That you have this just bizarre shit happening on the side, but also it gives you this perspective where everything takes on less emotional valence because it had to happen. It had already happened before you experienced it. And even after it does happen, you're not dead. The people you love aren't dead. You can choose to go back and spend your time and your memory on whatever part of your life was the most pleasant for you. Which I think is you could call it a coping mechanism, or you could talk about it as a beautiful way to think about life.
Einstein subscribed to that, or at least he wrote a lovely letter to a grieving widow along those lines.
Sure. Einstein, however, we know, was completely wrong about many things. A genius, an absolute genius. Einstein wrote in 1905, he wrote 4 papers dealing with 4 fundamental constants. He revolutionized physics. He's the one that basically created particle quantum mechanics by proving that light could be both a particle and a wave with his first paper. And then he did special relativity, and then he did something else on Brownian motion, and then he did general relativity. And then he spent the rest of his career trying to disprove quantum mechanics, which he's one of the founding fathers of. Yeah, because he just couldn't wrap his head around it.
Did not like where that went.
Nope. Yeah. So anyway. Easy to take pot shots at Einstein. He's dead.
Yep.
All right, so let's get into that. Let's get into it. We talked about it a little bit last time. We didn't have time, but you were like, yeah, block universe. That's plausible.
Well, plausible or not, I mean, there are questions that we simply will not have answered in our lifetimes,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And questions that we could not understand the answers to, even if we had them in our lifetimes. Maybe this is one of those. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think it's just a lovely concept, though, and I love the way that the aliens deal with it. Well, they don't deal with it. This is how they live.
Yeah.
But, all of time is happening all the time.
Yes.
Right? So what do? They choose to look at the nice bits. It's not that the bad bits, because Billy makes the mistake while he's incarcerated of thinking they have a peaceful society. Mm-hmm. And he says, you guys should come to Earth and teach us how to have a peaceful society. And the aliens... They close their fingers over their eye. Now, remember, this is their head, right? This is the top of the toilet plunger. That's their head. This is what they do when he does something stupid. He's like, what? Why is that stupid? I've come to recognize this. Why is this stupid? And they're like, we don't have a peaceful society. We've had wars. We're having wars. We're always going to have had wars. And he's like, well, how do you deal with it? We just look at the nice bits. We don't look at those.
See, to me, that's a moral failing. Yeah. You can't just go... I mean, that's kind of like, okay, yeah, our country is in ruins, riots, criminals, whatever, but I'm just going to live in the nice part.
Assuming that you're looking at the entirety of time, right? So, I mean, if you were to step off a cliff, mm-hmm. could you choose not to fall?
You could maybe.
Taken as a given, you have stepped off of the cliff. You are now Wile E. Coyote in air.
Yeah.
Could you choose not to fall?
If I take your hypothetical at your word, that there's literally nothing you could do, then of course gravity's going to act on you. You have no choice.
Right.
However, if you stumble off a cliff, you do have a choice not to fall, of like scrabbling for the edge. Maybe there's a branch growing out. You could twist your body in the air and land more or less. You have some agency.
Well, an argument by analogy always fails at some point.
Yes,
and there it goes.
Yeah.
Right? But I mean, I love the idea that if you take determinism to this ridiculous extreme, mm-hmm. I have no agency. I'm simply a puppet. What sane choice remains to you? And that's the aliens in this have discovered the only sane choice. Enjoy the bits that are enjoyable and stick around those.
All right, let me think about that. Because then if you have no agency, if you are always going to have done what you do, then you can't be faulted for any choice that you make.
But you also cannot make a choice.
Yeah.
So I guess we're saying no agency, and that's not accurate because they seem to have agency over what they're choosing to experience.
Yeah, but that's just where they are on the track.
Right.
Yeah. But like you wake up in the morning, it's like, should I go to the gym? Should I get my work done? Or should I eat a bowl of Fruit Loops and just stay in my pajamas all day?
Well, in point of fact, you've already eaten a bowl of Fruit Loops and stayed in your pajamas.
If you make that choice, yes.
No, it's not a choice to have been made.
If you believe that, if you subscribe to this, then yeah, you say, I always ate Fruit Loops. I have no choice. Darling wife, this is inevitable. Yeah.
This is what I have always done at this moment and will always continue to do at this moment.
And this is why I think this is an info hazard. You can't live like that. You have to live as if you have agency over your own life. You have to live as if other people have agency over their own lives, because otherwise people are just going to, well, who knows?
I mean, certainly we can find examples of people who think they have no agency over their life and they're miserable.
Yeah.
Right. And we can certainly hypothesize that somebody who felt they had no agency over their life might use this as justification to do horrific things.
Yeah.
It's easy to hypothesize that. I cherish the idea that you could find that you had no agency over your life and find a way to benignly enjoy it.
I guess it seems very Buddhist to me.
Oh, thank you. I've invented Buddhism.
Yeah.
From the works of Vonnegut.
I'm not a subscriber of Buddhism either. I find it deeply problematic for similar reasons, that it removes agency and it focuses too much on sacrifice. But all right. So I'm going to go off on a tangent here. Have we talked?
Have we not already?
Well, this is deeply important to the theme of the book.
It is, in fact.
Have we talked on this podcast before about a story called, I think it's called Gonna Roll Them Bones, a Hellbound Train. It's a story about a hellbound train.
We talked about it, and I went out and read it as a result of us talking about it.
Interesting.
It came up. I don't even remember what book we were talking about at the time. But
I actually need to read that story again because I haven't read it in a while. But it had a profound effect on me. This story. So again, quick refresher: as a guy makes a deal with the devil, and he can stop time at any moment, and he can just enjoy that moment. And when he makes this deal with the devil, he's a wino, and he says, "I'm just going to go out and get a really great bottle of wine, and I'm going to get wasted, and then boom, and I'm just going to be wasted for all eternity." And then he's like, well, no, this is a great opportunity. I should try to find a better moment for myself. And by pursuing a better and better moment, he leaves a higher and higher purpose life. He eventually gets married, has kids, and there's never a point where he thinks, my life cannot be better than this. I'm going to stop right here. So in fact, he dies before he gets a chance to pull the watch. Yeah, and there's more to it than that, but that's the point to focus on.
The more to it than that is the part that I think is redemptive, right?
Oh, I think that part is the part that's redemptive. The other part is the part where he tricks the devil. Yeah.
Right, and that's I think the redemption, right? When he in fact, okay, if you're not familiar with the story that we're not talking about in the book that you probably have read that we are talking about, you might want to skip ahead just a bit. When he pushes that button is when he gets on the train with the devil.
Yes.
So for his moment of forever is riding the hellbound train, picking up other people on their journey. And the people who are there are also trapped along with him. You see, and I think he has found a way to benignly enjoy that moment of eternity.
Yes.
And I'm saying hallelujah.
And he always imagined that he would enjoy that ride to hell from the very beginning of the story. He talks about that.
Yes,
and that's why he sort of
indeed.
led him into his dire circumstances.
It doesn't come out of nowhere. It
Yes.
is set up pretty decently. And in fact, he's not just a passenger. He becomes the conductor or the ticket maker.
Yeah.
He becomes involved in the running of the train.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the devil is dismayed that now he is forever bound to the train.
Yes.
I say benign, but it's not benign. He's actually done mankind a service because he's taken the devil out of rotation, or has he?
Yeah. I love that. I love that he gets to pull one over on the devil because the devil knows that he's going to do the other thing because the devil's very clever. He knows he'll never have an opportunity to do it in life and doesn't catch the fact that he can do it on the train itself. So that's a very fun twist. But what makes the story profound for me is that by taking agency over his own life, he improves his life to an enormous degree. He just ratchets up, and that's the lesson for me. Yeah, everything else is science fiction stuff. But this is different. A block universe is different. That's like, I have one moment of pleasure somewhere. There's no opportunity to create a better life for yourself, a better moment, because you have no agency whatsoever. Either you did or you didn't. And that to me is just unthinkably bad. Yeah.
But you can spend as much time as you want enjoying the good moments that are there.
There's value to that.
And like revisiting old books, maybe you will find that a moment is better than, with repeats than it was before, or maybe a moment you have ignored for a while and you go back to is surprisingly good.
No, there's...
No,
there's value. We're getting so off topic here. There's value...
Just like the book itself.
Yeah. There's incredible value to being able to cherish, and I think that's important to Vonnegut, and I think the reason he talks about this, to value the and revisit the good parts of your life, to remember those, to cherish them, to live in those moments. Where I disagree is that it feels like he's kind of given up on life, and he's not creating more moments. He's like, at some point, he's just kind of like, I've got my little collection of moments. I can live happily there. And this is of no concern to me because I have no control over it anyway.
Yeah, Billy Pilgrim does not spend much time being happy.
He doesn't.
Even when he's in those moments that other people looking at would classify as happy moments, he doesn't seem like a happy character.
Well, he is at some point. He's happy in his marriage. He marries someone he never should have married because she's rich, but he eventually falls in love with her and they have a kid, and he's very proud of his son, and there's a lot of happiness there, and Vonnegut glosses over that. Which is surprising.
Yeah, he doesn't spend much time on that, which is why I have that impression that Billy Pilgrim is not a happy individual.
I think he is, though. I think Vonnegut just doesn't care. Vonnegut's such a weird dude. But, like, I have friends, I'm 61, okay? And I have friends who are younger than me who are just kind of like, well, at this point in our lives, the best times are behind us, it's all about looking back. I'm like, pardon my profanity, fuck that. No, the best times are always ahead of you. What do you have to live for if the best times of your life are not ahead of you? Dear God. Anyway, sorry.
So you would be miserable in a prison on Tralfamadore.
I don't know. Doesn't he get to marry a porn star?
He does get to marry a female actress. He leaves her pregnant.
Yeah.
Another thing that's glossed over is how much time did he spend
on Tralfamadore?
Yeah. Right. And how does he get reinserted back into Earth? But that doesn't really matter. I loved the description of the Tralfamadorian books.
Remind me.
So when they kidnap him, and they spend a long time getting him to Tralfamadore. I'm just going to stick with the alien world. To his zoo, right?
Yeah.
And, they bring, all of his furniture was stolen from a Sears Roebuck warehouse.
Oh, yes.
Along with tubs and tubs of mayonnaise, which I'm glad he dropped that detail. I was nauseated just thinking about it. But they only brought like a couple of Earth books, which he read over and over. So he asked for a local book, and they're like, all right, well, here's a local book, but you won't be able to understand it. And it was basically blocks of text separated by sections of little stars, which is exactly the way the entire book is written. There's a paragraph or maybe two paragraphs, and then there's a series of dots. They're not stars, they're dots. And then one of the aliens would experience them all simultaneously, which he cannot do. But he reads them and he says, they're telegrams. And they're like, well, you're right. I mean, we don't have telegrams, but if we had telegrams, these would be telegrams. It's just vignettes that happen to have been happening all at the same time. Again, we're playing with Douglas Adams' grammar for time travelers.
Yeah. That, by the way, is also a concept of a work of art that you experience in its totality simultaneously that's come up in two other books that we've read on this podcast. And one is Agents of the Stars, the smell paintings.
Oh, yes.
That just bam, because it's smell. And then the other was... shoot, no, I've forgotten.
I was curious.
Shoot. It was another one of my picks, and it's not Scalzi. It'll come back to me. Okay, moving on.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so that's enough about Tralfamadore maybe for now. Let's talk about the Dresden part of the book.
Okay.
So this is the first time I read this, is my first experience, first knowledge of Dresden and this firebombing, and it was horrific. And I was just like, well, why did no one ever tell me about this? Why have I never heard about this?
As far as I know, it stands as the single largest man-made calamity in the world, in the history of humanity anyway.
Yeah.
I hate to think of what would dwarf that. But, the A-bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I mean, they were shocking in the size and virulence of a single bomb, but in overall destruction and death toll, they pale compared to Dresden.
They're on the same order of magnitude. It was like 80,000 versus 130,000. So I wouldn't say pale, but the fact that it's one weapon, that was the terrifying thing.
A single bomb could do this. The other took a fleet of bombers, and it was a logistic ordeal to happen, but...
Yeah, and I think multiple days. I think it was carried over 2 or 3 days. Yeah.
But yeah, they burned an entire city, not a small one.
Yeah. No, it was like the fourth largest city in Germany at the time or something.
It was big. I don't know if it was how it ranked, but I know it was a large one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. And it just doesn't come up. Never came up in my history classes. Yeah.
I remember knowing about it, maybe even in grade school or maybe in high school, but I don't remember why. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it came up in a history class or if I stumbled on it through something else. I was a bit annoyed when the Dresden files came around and they actually had absolutely nothing to do with Dresden. It's like, what? That's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Tangent, sidebar. The other book was Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom. When they took the Hall of Presidents and turned it into a flash experience in your brain.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is widely regarded as an anti-war novel. And I think it is. I think, Vonnegut comes out and says it's an anti-war novel, even though one of the characters he talks to in the book says, you might as well write an anti-glacier novel. You can't stop glaciers and you can't stop war. Yeah. And I think it would be more effective. Again, it's his novel, his experience, if it wasn't so overtly an anti-war novel, if it was just this experience and this weirdness. Because the banality with which he describes the Dresden scenes is just so, it hits you so hard because he's not overselling it. He's just, this happened and then this happened and then they shot this guy because he picked up a teapot and then this happened and then that guy just froze to death in the train car and da-da-da-da. This guy died of gangrene because he had no shoes.
It goes.
And so it goes. Yeah.
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 It's ludicrous and it's horrific. And he manages to weave those together, which is just bizarre.
Yeah.
The idea that, of the handful of survivors, he's wearing a fur stole, silver go-go boots.
Yes.
And it's still winter, although they're tromping through the burning, smoldering ruins.
Yeah.
Trying to get out of there.
Yeah.
Only to be sent back in.
Who is it? Is it the English officers who see him and they're offended by the way he's dressed because they think he's mocking the war? Or is it Germans or Russians? Somebody gets really angry at him.
I think it was Russians. Yeah. But it might have been the English.
Yeah.
Oh, there was something in there when they meet up with the English prisoners.
Yeah.
And the very first thing the English prisoners do after throwing this feast for them, which makes them all sick, but they start lecturing them on personal hygiene.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, there's something in the back of my head ringing. It took a while. This is Bridge over the River Kwai, right? It's like I might be a prisoner, but I'm going to wash my face twice a day. I'm going to shave daily. I'm going to be a British officer at my best.
Yeah, that was a big thing with the British Officer Corps. You had to maintain your personal hygiene and to maintain your dignity. To maintain your moral authority over those men you were supposed to lead. If you allowed yourself to slacken your personal appearance, then they would cease to respect you and they would cease to take orders from you. You would also cease to respect yourself and you would then fail in your courage when you needed it the most. It's an interesting idea and I could see how people would take issue with it, but I like it. I'm a believer.
I mean, the idea of discipline, whether it's in personal hygiene or some other aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly discipline is an important thing both for leadership and for survival.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just interesting because it seemed to me that he could have taken that monologue from Bridge Over the River Kwai and pasted it into his novel, although I don't know which one came first. Yeah. Maybe Bridge Over the River Kwai took it from Vonnegut. But I swear that there's a scene in there that has that, with a British officer addressing American prisoners and saying...
Yeah, I'm sure it comes up in many
wash your
books.
face, you know?
There's a Monty Python sketch where they are...
The tiger?
The tiger, yes, yeah. But they're still shaving. It's like, well, hang on, we'll get to your leg, and yeah. I mean, I think it's just baked into the culture.
2 episodes in a row, we've gotten sidetracked by Monty Python.
Because Monty Python will always be relevant. Yeah, but that was fascinating. They're so English, and they try to cheer the men up by singing to them. These starving, wretched prisoners who some of them are going to die soon from the wounds that they sustained already. And it's like, oh, let's rouse you with a song. That's the thing. And then they give them lots of food and stuff to eat. And then, of course, they haven't eaten anything for a while, so they all puke their guts out. And then they go, well, you boys have it easy because we're stuck here. We haven't seen a flower or a woman in 4 years, but you're going to Dresden, which I hear is very nice this time of year.
Mm-hmm. I was looking at some of my highlights here, and I'm not sure if this telegram is autobiographical. It sounds like it is, but it's towards the end of the book, and I think you might sympathize with this one. He's talking about the Tralfamadorian view of time. Mm-hmm. If what Billy Pilgrim learned from the Tralfamadorians is true, that we will all live forever, no matter how dead we may sometimes seem to be, I am not overjoyed. Still, if I'm going to spend eternity visiting this moment and that, I'm grateful that so many of those moments are nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
So Vonnegut, he wrote this in 1968. So if he was like 20-something, I'm not sure when he was born, but he was like 20-something in the war. Then he wrote it about 20 years later. He would have been about 45. He feels to me, and in a lot of books he feels to me this way, like a man at the end of his life trying to look back at the parts that were good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's another book he wrote called, is it Slapshot? Where he talks about how the world needs a lot less kindness and a lot more common courtesy. Yeah.
Oh, this is another fun one. I know we were going to move away from Tralfamadore in the Black universe, but
go for it.
Billy Pilgrim is discussing with one of the aliens their view of time. You sound to me as though you don't believe in free will, said Billy Pilgrim. If I hadn't spent so much time studying Earthlings, said the alien, I wouldn't have any idea what was meant by free will. I visited 31 inhabited planets in the universe, and I have studied reports on 100 more. Only on Earth is there any talk of free will.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's why we're going to win.
That's why we're such a threat to everyone else.
Yeah.
That was why Billy wanted them to come and teach us to be peaceful, lest humanity come out and be a threat to the universe. But the Tralfamadorians already know how the universe ends, and we've got nothing to do with it.
Oh, yeah, that was bleak. We
Yep.
know that we tried to invent a faster form of space travel, and one scientist pushes a button and it ends the entire universe.
Pushes the start button. Yeah. That's it. The universe is over.
That's it. But we can't stop it because it already happened.
Happened.
It's like, what a way to live. What a way to live. So we were talking about the British officers earlier. I highlighted a passage that I really enjoyed. There's a guy, Lazaro, who threatens to kill everyone who's wronged him in the war. He's threatened to kill Billy Pilgrim because a friend of Lazaro's dies and says, Billy Pilgrim did this to me.
He wasn't really a friend. They had never met before they got locked in that boxcar to die.
Lazaro just strikes me as a guy who was just eager to put names on the list of people he wanted to kill. And he threatens to kill one of the British officers. He says, "Oh, you made a big mistake. Anybody touches me, you better kill me, or I'm going to have him killed." And the British officer who's dressed as the Blue Fairy Godmother from Cinderella, I think, the Blue Fairy Godmother knew something about killing. He gave Lazaro a careful smile. "There is still time for me to kill you," he said, "if you really persuade me that it's the sensible thing to do." Lazaro says, "Why don't you go fuck yourself?" Don't think I haven't tried. The blue fairy godmother.
I haven't tried. Yep.
I love that. I love that.
And this is, again, there's such a bizarre mixture of the ridiculous and the horrific in this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these little comic bits, you know, the British officer dressed as a blue fairy godmother, the fact that they have this abundance of food due to a typo on a requisition order is happening in the midst of a concentration. The camp that they are in is not a prison camp. It's an execution camp for killing Russian prisoners.
Yeah.
They have ended up there, the British ended up there years ago because there wasn't a special place for British, and the Americans have ended up there because there was no room anywhere else for them. So there's this tiny little corner of this place that's an execution camp. They're killing Russians by the boatloads. And in this, they're putting on a musical version of Cinderella.
Yeah. Now, what's fascinating about this to me, because Catch-22 is also another one of my favorite novels, although I don't think I've ever read it more than once. So I haven't chosen it for that reason, because it's just one of those books that just hits you and you go, I don't know if I can do that again.
Yeah.
But Catch-22 points out the absurdity of same war, World War II, different theater, but it's deliberately comic. And here, I don't think Vonnegut is deliberately comic. I think a lot of these crazy, absurd things are drawn from his experience. Mm-hmm. That they're absurd in the way they're presented because he doesn't set them up. He doesn't try to present them as, he just goes, yeah, and then this crazy thing happened. You're like, dear God, that's insane. Well, yeah, a lot of insane shit happened during the war. So it's absurd without being deliberately comic, but the effect is comic. But it's different from Catch-22, if that makes sense.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, I don't know what Vonnegut set out to write, but Catch-22 was written to be a comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, or at least to be deliberately comedic. I think that the comedy that comes from this, like you say, it's not staged. I mean, the fact that he got out of a pile of frozen greatcoats, right? The German soldiers pried the top one off and handed it to him. It happened to have a fur collar and be several sizes too small for him. It was a woman's overcoat that was too small for him. And it happened to have a giant diamond and a partial denture in it.
A 2-carat diamond, which he gives to his wife when he proposes. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I love the fact they talk about anybody could bring treasures home from the war, souvenirs home from the war, and yet in that same area, you've got the guy who gets shot for looting a teapot from the smoking ruins of the entire city.
Yeah.
So it goes.
It's horrible. And then, I don't know, the thing that impressed me so much the previous time when I read it, and I still enjoyed it this time, although I balked at chapter 1 this time, so that kind of put me off my game for a little bit, is his writing style of it. If it's just that sort of plainness to the style, and yet it's not simple. It's not dull, but it's not, it's not literary. It doesn't feel literary
not
to me.
The least.
He doesn't ever reach for, a more complicated word where a simple one will do.
And I feel he shares that, with Stephen King. Although Stephen King tells a linear tale, and Vonnegut does not, but they don't need extended language.
Yes.
Right. They're doing this with the whatever 300 words. Yeah. Most common vocabulary words.
Yeah. Unlike someone like Michael Chabon, for instance, who, sometimes you'll find a paragraph where you got to look up half a dozen words. Yeah. Just like, what are you talking about?
Although I did learn a new word.
I saw you highlighted a word there.
I have to go back to my notes.
I found one also. Rhodomontides. I don't even know how to pronounce it. And also, I don't remember what it is now.
All right. Our crimes become both monumental and quotidian.
Oh, quotidian. That's
quotidian
a great word.
Was a new word for me.
Oh, okay.
And it was lovely. It's there in chapter 1.
Yeah. A rhodomontity is inflated talk or behavior. Or post.
Yeah, I didn't highlight that one, but I remember coming across it and having to look it up.
Yeah.
So there you have it, listeners. Your 2 words for the day.
Yeah. Oh, I think I only have one more thing to say about this book, which is Kilgore Trout makes an appearance.
Yes.
As not just as an author, but as a character. Again, like Breakfast of Champions. He's a character in Breakfast of Champions. and he comes in again as an actual person in this book. Yeah. So
I absolutely adore that when Billy Pilgrim meets him, and Kilgore Trout's asking, "Where do you know me from?"
Yeah.
And Billy's like, "I'm a huge fan of your work." He's like, "What?" He's completely unaware that anyone has ever seen one of his books, much less that they would enjoy them.
Yes.
And it takes him a while to wrap his head around that fact that he is, in fact, a writer.
Yeah. That's staggering. Like his books, and Vonnegut actually got started this way, writing short stories that got published in men's magazines because they needed filler. You had to, by law, have a certain amount of printed material if you're going to sell stuff with photographs in it. And so a lot of Kilgore Trout's novels are carried in a porn shop, and they're in the front to make the porn shop look legitimate.
Right. That's right. I'd forgotten that.
And so Billy Pilgrim goes in to buy some of these books, and they're like, "No, the good stuff's in the back. What do you do? These are for display, man. Nobody wants these."
They keep steering him further into the back where the more and more pornographic stuff is, but he's carrying the Kilgore Trout book. So when he finally goes to check out, the clerk is dismayed at what his choice is.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that was Slaughterhouse Five. That's for me. I don't know if you got anything else.
I think that our discussion has been every bit as concise as the book itself.
It is a short, punchy read. It is. I won't say it's fun, but
parts of it are fun.
Parts of it are fun.
It's good that parts of it are fun. Those are the parts you want to revisit.
Yeah.
Like this moment. I wouldn't mind revisiting this moment. Yeah. This isn't a bad moment.
I'm just going to read this page over and over. Not those other pages. Those other pages already exist. They will always existed, but I don't need to read them.
I'm always going to have not read them. I'm always not going to have read them.
All right. That's a good note to end on.
It does. It does sound like a good one.
What's next?
I'm really enjoying this messed up world thing that we seem to be, this kick we seem to be on. So we are going to revisit Philip K. Dick and ask the question, do androids dream of electric sheep?
Oh, Lord. Do they? I've read it. I don't remember. I don't remember the answer. Yeah.
All right. Well, we will find out in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.